It's time to talk about some busted bold predictions. This time of year, my self-esteem fairly routinely busted because all we focus on is the predictions we got wrong. And so it helps me to go back in time and look at all the predictions you gave me because I asked you for them in August. Which of your predictions crashed and burned? This is a very positively negative segment that we do. It's all in good fun, but like, for example, let's take a look at the first one. Fortunately, I didn't make any of these predictions. I just put a boldness rating on them, like this one. Prediction: no new Big Ten team, no new SEC team makes the playoff. I put a 9.75 on this back in May when we got it because it was psychotic, and it did not hit. Texas and Oregon had top 5 playoff odds. Both of them, of course, made it. So we had a new team from each league make it. USC was in this. They could have done something, but they didn't. Oklahoma was in this. They never were close to doing anything. But the point is, there were just too many viable teams for me to believe none of them were going to make a 12-team playoff. So that one crashed and burned, and it was never even in doubt. Like there was never a world where both Texas and Oregon were going to miss the playoff. Next up, Zach hit us, and a friend of the program, by the way, Zach Poff hit us and said, Arizona. I didn't know he said runs the table. Arizona runs the table and wins the Big 12. Noah Fafita wins the Heisman at plus 3,000 odds. Man, the Big 12 champion came from the state of Arizona and this still whiffed. So famously, Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State won the Big 12. Arizona was busy going 4-8 after they were top 5 in the odds in the preseason. Brent Brennan came in there, tried to do whatever he could in year one. It did not work. It did not take off. And Arizona State actually ended up doing these. Now, no one from the state of Arizona was going to win the Heisman, but I put a 9.5 on that, and the only reason it wasn't higher is because it's the Big 12, and anything can happen in the Big 12, but not that. So next up, Evan out of Brooklyn, New York. You just picked the wrong year, Evan. He said Georgia will play Oregon for the national championship. You just picked the wrong year, because if this were the BCS era, we would have been looking at Texas versus Oregon for the national title. Even if it were the 4-team playoff era, I think there's a half-decent chance we would have seen Texas, or we would have seen Georgia versus Oregon for the national title, because Ohio State wouldn't have even been in the thing, which goes back to the whole Cinderella concept. The only thing that you're doing when you expand the playoff field is you're giving teams like Ohio State another shot. And guess what's going to happen? An Ohio State team that couldn't get out of its own way against Michigan figures itself out and becomes a steamroller in the playoff. Well, you know what? Good for us for giving Ohio State a third shot. What wasn't going to happen, as it turns out, was Oregon or Georgia end up playing for a national title because they both went one and done. Injuries were a big factor here. Carson Beck out, Evan Stewart out, Jordan James out for Oregon. That was a 9.5 even out of the gate, though, because it's just really hard to predict the matchup in the national title. And lastly, Joe from Nottingham. I'm not even going to try the accent. Nottingham in the UK. Good people there. Joe hit me and said, no one conference has more than 3 total teams in the playoff. You were close, Joe. But here's what you needed. You needed Notre Dame to get in, which they did. You needed 2 ACC teams, which you got. But you needed like 2 Big 12 teams or 2 G5 teams, and that did not happen. And as a result, Big Ten actually got 4. So the Big Ten got Penn State, Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon. I only put an 8.75 on that, on the boldness scale. Like, could have seen it, Joe. I don't think you were just totally fishing in the dark, as we say here in the States. Well, those of us who are familiar with the 80s country music genre would say fishing in the dark. But that was an 8.75, not terrible. The rest of these were 9.5s or higher. There is always a chalice of supremacy on the line if you make a prediction that is 9.5 or bolder and it hits. Jesse, we still have like 1 or 2 in play, right? That we're still waiting on some things to play out. Like 3 or 4. Oh, man, 2 have hit. We have to mail out 2 chali. I'll reveal which ones those were at a later date. We are people of our word here.